Hi, my name is Heather Kirkman Hurst, and I am a librarian at Alex R. Kennedy Elementary in Louisville, Kentucky, JCPS, J Castle. And I'm here to talk to you today about my journey in dumping Dr. Seuss to comply with the NEA's rebranding of Read Across America. Prior to becoming a school librarian, I served for 7 years as a children's librarian at Louisville Free Public Library, Southwest Regional Branch, Go LFPL. I'm going to give them some props. And although I was slow to act upon it, I'm sure you know that in 2019, NEA changed its theme to celebrate a diverse nation of readers. This year, the NEA added the word create to its theme to read. Create and celebrate a nation of diverse readers. I like this change because it indicates that we're doing more than celebrating. We are encouraging people to read more about cultures other than our own, which goes a long way toward humanizing groups that have experienced racial trauma. And that is what I mean about diverse readers. My students are already ethnically diverse, and so my goal is having them read about other diverse American experiences. And even if you do not work in a community as diverse as mine, I think it's even more important to share these stories so that we understand that we're all Americans. My confession is that I learned the hard way, but I came around. Well, not like anything's happened between 2019 and now. I hadn't changed, including Dr. Seuss, a little bit in my Read Across America celebrations. We have been teaching online for 2 years during the pandemic. I mean, a good portion of that was online, and I had to change my teaching completely for that. And when we came back in session last year, what's my go-to? I include a little bit of Dr. Seuss, even though my Read Across America program wasn't completely about him at that point. It was for many, many years. And I had a lot of excuses for why I hadn't removed Dr. Seuss yet. One is that I thought I didn't need to totally get rid of him. After all, our library participated in the Global Read Aloud, which is a fantastic program aligned with promoting diverse children's literature. We have a fantastic collection of diverse books in my library that I use regularly. My collection, for the most part, is 2015 or newer, since that's when my school was started. Um, I don't have outdated racial stereotypes in general in my collection, but when I was called out by this member of my community, our counselor, for using Dr. Seuss, and she pointed directly to the offensive books, I didn't like it at first because I consider myself kind of a politically correct individual, but she was right. I had a little bit of Seuss backlash on my own part, and I'll get into a little bit of that. But I will also say that I did end up getting rid of two Dr. Seuss titles that were in my collection, and I am virulently anti-censorship. However, she pointed out that some people might find Dr. Seuss cringeworthy, and of course, no one had brought that idea to me before. Dr. Seuss cringeworthy? What? He's adorable. Well, these ethnic stereotypes in the books were definitely cringeworthy, and after mentally defending him for a little while, I realized that an ethnic stereotype is a good reason to remove a book from your collection. So I did get rid of If I Were in the Zoo. At least I put it back in my little special cabinet. And Mulberry Street, which was published in 1934 anyway. I didn't need that dragging down my collection. The other members of the Serious Six that are recommended to get rid of were McGilligut's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, The Cat's Quizzer, and Scrambled Egg Super. So those are books that, if you want to remove those for racial stereotypes, that is totally up to you. But I still have 27 Dr. Seuss books in my library, and they're not going anywhere because the kids still check them out, and I'm completely fine with that. One of the reasons why I had such a hard time was I began my career as a school librarian at Phyllis Wheatley Elementary 10 years ago. And the school demographics are 80% African American. I was an outsider there, and Dr. Seuss was an in for me in my first year of K-TIP. Um, Everybody already loved Dr. Seuss, and so I had a great big Read Across America event where staff dressed up as the characters. I mean, look at this quote. It's one of the best quotes of all times. It's just what we really want to do as librarians, and it's encourage people to read and grow their minds. So I had the display, this huge display with truffula trees and staff members dressed up as the Lorax and the Cat in the Hat standing there with kids, and each one of them had their hat on and was reading, and I took their picture and made these cards to send home to every family to encourage them to read, and it was a huge success. This was my K-tip year, and I have a big binder of that, or I did have a big binder of that. It was about 30 pounds before I pitched it. It was about 30 pounds. People don't have to do that anymore, but I got rid of mine. I guess I was a little frustrated, but I do wish I had those pictures now to reflect on. And 10 years later, what's the why? Why am I really doing this? I never considered this before. I just knew that it was a celebration. Everybody had a great time. But I had to answer those questions for the first time, maybe a little bit late. But I mean, 2019, we were getting ready to have the pandemic. And so there were almost 2 years between then and now that we were either teaching online and did not have a full Read Across America celebration. Do I even need to promote Seuss? No. If there isn't anyone who hasn't heard of them, I'm sorry. I'm sure that they probably have heard of Dr. Seuss. Am I just nostalgic? Yes. Do I think Seuss was a sexy radical environmentalist? Yes. And that was part of my problem is I love the Lorax. I love the Sneetches, which is a book about anti-consumerism, even though I've heard it taught in so many other ways. I really think that was the message Seuss was getting at, and maybe more for adults than children, as in some of his books that I really believe are messages for adults. The Lorax was a banned book. It was banned in California because of its negative portrayal of the logging industry. I think that was 1989. Go figure. That makes it even more sexy, right? So, what are the books that I should be promoting? I already knew that. I had been working to diversify my collection. Everyone has in the last few years. The thing is, these are books that people don't know about, so it's a little harder to get them excited about it. You need to promote those books a little harder because it's not something that children are automatically drawn to. Teachers don't have the time to look for books for themselves a lot of the times, and so they're looking at you, and they want to teach with stuff that they've been teaching with for the last 10 years in some cases, because the familiarity of a book helps people love it more. So I'm working on promoting those. Bye-bye, Dr. Seuss. I did finally have the guts to give up my red and white hats, my bulletin board displays of Dr. Seuss. The dress-up days, I think, is still going to be a problem for my staff to get rid of because they love that. They're going to want to dress up this year as characters for Dr. Seuss. We'll just have to have a different type of book. Maybe we can still do book character dress-up day. We'll see. I had guest readers that read Dr. Seuss books. The University of Louisville athletes would come in, and all of my Seuss programming was hugely popular. So that was another reason why it was hard to walk away. What I did not give up is using Dr. Seuss when I want to teach rhyming words. I'm using him to look at nonsense words and create nonsense words for fun, and all of the whimsy that comes with Dr. Seuss. I check them out to students still. I check out the Dr. Seuss books to students, And the only way I can replace all of that is by trying to have a fabulous Read Across America program now. And I know it's going to take a few years for people to get used to the change. But what I came up with is ARC Read Around the World, ARC Alex R. Kennedy. And this is a reading incentive program that rewards students who listen to 25 books from multicultural choice boards. And I think Read Around the World is a little bit of a generic title. I am going to change it. For next year, it's going to be called We Are All Americans. But this year, with it being new to me, I was really focused on what books I selected for each board because I am an outsider and it's not easy to pick books for another culture that you think represent the students do get to self-select. There are 8 cultural titles on each board, so they choose 5 that they want. In the end, they've read 25 books, and they will get a reward of a cute little globe that's also a pencil sharpener. And in every cultural choice board, I have capstone ebook titles. I have a fantastic capstone ebook interactive collection. But I always included books that I have a physical copy of in the library as well, in case students, after listening to the title, they will want to check out the real one later. So this is the seed for the program that I'm doing now, the Read Around the World. Last year I had the ARK 25 Book Challenge, and the program was very similar to what I'm doing now. So we're 25 books. Last year it was just reading any capstone interactive ebook titles and putting them on a slideshow and turning that into me via Google Classroom. The participation was huge, but as you can see, I was still including Dr. Seuss. The prize for this was the rubber ducky with the stovepipe hat on, but kids loved it. You've got it, rubber duckies. You little piece of plastic, they will work for it. And this is a drive-by event where they came in to get their prizes. University of Louisville cheerleaders were there to say, "Great job for reading your 25 books." And I added cupcakes for Dr. Seuss's birthday. So, it was hard for me to get rid of Dr. Seuss. And so, bye-bye, Dr. Seuss. I did liquidate all of my Dr. Seuss materials at that event because I was like, here, you can take it, because it just helps me not use him any longer. This is my current program, Read Around the World. And you can see the focus is the same. This year, I just want them to read and track 25 diverse books before March 2nd. And they're going to pick 5 books from each cultural choice board. The thing about this program is it does have some of the elements that made my Dr. Seuss events popular. There is a pretty widespread participation. It is fun. The kids think it's fun. The staff hasn't quite caught on yet, but I think they will in the next few years. It's still a little bit new. Let me go over here to my first cultural choice board. Pick 5 books about Native American culture to read or listen to. On the left, the 2 far left books are from my Capstone Interactive collection. Those are books that read to the student. This is a fully electronic program, so every student gets a copy of this Google slideshow in their Google Classroom. When they click on one of these books, it automatically takes them to a read aloud version. So the read aloud versions of those are on Capstone with more of a robotic voice. The other titles I got from YouTube, and I tried to pick the best readings, most creative readings from YouTube to link those books up to. So if you think that's a little bit too, easy, they're just listening to stories, I think that's huge. I'm a listener of stories. You're getting students to listen to stories about people that they may not be familiar with. And it's true. A lot of students don't understand who Native Americans are. They don't understand all of these different cultures. So we're doing a great service even having them listen to these books. The only title on this slide that I did not already have in my collection is Go Show the World. That one was new to me. I found it on a Best Books for Native American Culture website, and I'm going to have to buy that one. Two by Joseph Broshak. He's a standard, and I absolutely love him. Fry Bread is part of the Global Read Aloud program that I did last year, so the students were already familiar with that book and they love it. Squanto's Journey is a very difficult story, but an important one, and maybe one that's more for the older readers. But I believe all of these show a resilience of character despite the hardships of Native American culture. Last thing that I want to say about this is the capstone books, especially tie into KCAS standards, the Kentucky Common Core standards. So that is always something to think about. I feel like my capstone titles align very closely with Common Core. Latina culture. So I could have said Latinx, I suppose, but I don't think that my community knows what that is quite yet. So I just said Latina. Two books that are capstone, Cinco de Mayo and Christmas in Mexico. Cinco de Mayo has a song in it, so it's very light and fun. These other titles are in my collection. Gotta love the Tommy DePaula, Adelita, The Legend of the Poinsettia, kind of oldies but goodies. Maybe I should have looked more at the Pura Belpré Awards because I think that's a go-to list for librarians looking for Latin American culture books to share with students for teaching because they've already been verified and vetted, as fantastic books that represent that culture. Duncan Tonatu is the author of Esquivel and Separate is Never Equal. He was the featured artist in Global Read Aloud this year, and I absolutely adore him. I discovered him through Global Read Aloud. Dreamers is just a beautiful book. And I think we all know about Sofia Valdez, the future Prez, because she's friends with Rosie Revere, the engineer, and Ada Twist, the scientist. And a fun story behind that particular copy of the book, we have a Kentucky State representative who autographed the book and gave it to us to encourage all of our students to participate in democracy and political discourse. So she's a graduate of Alex R. Kennedy. Tina Bojanowski, you might see her name out there. She's a graduate of my school, and she wanted to make sure our school had a copy of that book. My next culture is African American culture, and I've got 3 books this time for my Capstone Interactive ebook collection. Rosa Parks, that's a song. Martin Luther King, super short, but necessary. This important man to read about any time of the year. In school in the civil rights movement. So that is something that students can relate to. What's the difference in the schooling today and what it was like during the civil rights movement? That's ties into Common Core. My other titles are very uplifting and encouraging. Black as a Rainbow Color. Me and Mama is a Coretta Scott King Award winner. RESPECT, Find Out What It Means to Me, is a fabulous book about Aretha Franklin. You can play the song along with that. And The Undefeated. I'm not sure you can find a book that really encapsulates the resilience of African American culture more than that one. I absolutely love it. And Milo Imagines the World is just for fun. It's just about a kid who has a very active and creative imagination. And, he doesn't go through any hardships or anything like that. So that might be something for me to think about for next year's. Maybe I'll include more books about kids being regular kids because I know that's important. Asian culture. So I have 3 titles for my capstone collection: Asia, Japan, and Chinese New Year. I love having lessons on Chinese New Year. It's so fun. And the other titles, one is Old Standard, Grandfather's Journey, Caldecott winner. Story stands the test of time. You got to use that one if you can, because it's so beautiful. The Paper Kingdom is a pretty new one. Mooncakes is an old one, but one that my students love. And I've got 2 KBA nominees, Lift, wonderful graphic novel, and the link to the video that I include with that is a fantastic reading of the nominee, with lots of animation. And I didn't really like the book so much because I'm not automatically drawn to graphic novels until I listened to that YouTube reading of the book, I'll be honest. And Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, another KBA nominee. And of course, all of these books are important as we experienced a rise in Asian hate crimes. I mean, we have a lot of racial hate crimes with other groups too, but it's important to include this one. And I like to tell the story of how I'm a witness to racism when I introduce the story of Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. So, this is my best friend. We met when I was 7 years old. Her name is Amy. We went to an elementary school in Oolitic, Indiana. And of course, on the first day, the teacher thought, well, her name must be Ami. It couldn't be Amy. It couldn't be that American, but it is. Her family is from Korea. And I unfortunately witnessed her being bullied. I witnessed her being called chink, Fuji. This picture is from 1987, and we're friends even today, but seeing her bullied like that because she has slanted eyes was something that I'll always remember. And she is such a resilient person. Seeing her stand up for herself was just incredible. Honestly, she inspired me to stand up for myself more, but I did stand by her side because I didn't completely understand what was happening at the time. But now, reflecting on it, I see that she was being bullied for her race and ethnicity. And one of the ways that she was so resilient is, she would get teased, Fuji must know karate. And so she went along with it one day. And she said, yeah, I do know karate. And she went over and she kicked one of the boys in the groin that was bullying her. And, that's my favorite story about her, she overcame. But I think it's important, again, to, if we've had these experiences, acknowledge them to kids. I think the worst thing that we can do is pretend that we've never seen any racism. That's just not reality. In my experience, I grew up in Southern Indiana. We are in Kentucky. In my community, I did hear the N word a lot when I was younger, and I would be surprised if we've never heard any racial slurs. And it's important to call those out as bullying when we hear them. And kids understand that. They know that someone is not supposed to be bullied because of the way they look. In a lot of cases, children can be much more moral than adults, and it's a good way. How do you address this? And I don't think that's always been one of the strong points as we talk about bullying, but not always with racial or ethnic stereotypes. So I think that's one of the things that we need to include is we don't bully people for their race or ethnicity. My last board is Middle Eastern culture, and this is one that I did not have enough good stories on, so I had to include a lot of books that are not in my collection, and now I need to improve my collection. One from Capstone that I had was Ramadan. That's an important cultural holiday to teach about. A lot of my students celebrate Ramadan. Joha Makes a Wish is one I've gotten a lot of great student feedback on, so I'll need to add that to my collection. I discovered it on a list of best Middle Eastern books. The Proudest Blue is a fabulous new book, and Under My Hijab is another one that's brand new. Golden Domes and Silver Lanterns was already in my collection. It's been out for quite a while, but it's another beautiful book. I have students that wear hijab in my school, and I think it can be one of the very misunderstood things that people assume that women are being repressed or oppressed because they're wearing the hijab, but we can't really understand that unless we're an insider in their culture. After all, I know that my mom had to wear a skirt to school up until the mid 60s. So we can't really judge their culture on what they have women wear when in our society we've been telling women what to wear for at least the last 100 years. But in selecting these books, those go-to lists, Coretta Scott King, Pour a Brel Prey, and there are lots of great lists that you can find that'll recommend good books for you in on each culture. There are cultures that maybe I didn't include that I could include next year. I don't have any Jewish books in this list. Maybe I should have Jewish American culture. So there's a lot to think about when you're making cultural selections that you want students to read. Racial healing. And this is something that I've just become aware of. ALA has been acknowledging the need for our country to engage in racial healing for at least the last 6 years. And the mission is to advance a more just and equitable society by bringing our expertise, our collections, and our relationships to advance the truth. A fabulous directive. And where that comes in for me, what can I do? I can be a more vocal advocate of diverse books. I can consistently promote the new multicultural books in my library, not just on Martin Luther King Day during Black History Month or whatever month. It doesn't have to be a holiday to read books about people of other cultures. After all of our stories are American. Hashtag libraries respond. So that is how I can respond. And one of the ways I've been an advocate of diverse books is by starting a YouTube channel where I do just 2-minute introductions to some of the new multicultural books that I have. It hasn't really taken off yet, but I will share that with you because I think that's important. You know, like I said, teachers sometimes are slower to come around and use, newer books. So I need to let them know about these fabulous new books that are being published that we should be using to acknowledge the diversity in our society. Okay. I just want to say a couple more things about racial healing. That day of National Healing is part of a larger movement for truth and transformation, a political and cultural framework developed by Dr. Gail Christopher and the Kellogg Foundation. THRT is embraced by more than 300 organizations in the academic, artistic, civic, and faith communities, calling for the establishment of the U.S. Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. Libraries and archives are in this movement to advance a more just and equitable society by bringing our expertise, etc., of our collections and our understandings, because that is the best way to understand another culture if you're an outsider, is to read a book about it, to listen to someone of that culture tell you their story. So that's what really scares me with banning books, is we can never, humanize the cultures that are demonized in our society if we're shutting down and banning books that talk about their stories and their hardships and their resilience. We need to read more, not less. So as librarians, we do have our own forms of karate. We all understand the importance of intellectual freedom and the right to read. I have not had a book challenged in my library. I will say that when I worked for the Louisville Free Public Library, I had a very strong complaint from a parent about a folk tale. This folk tale had a child that collected the bones of a pet horse that had died and kept the bones to remember the spirit of the animal. And that's just, part of that culture that was represented in the tale. But the parent found it offensive and thought that maybe we should remove it from the collection because maybe kids are going to be upset because keeping the bones of an animal might be something that upsets students. I didn't disagree with her. I just told her to fill out a book challenge form. And she was not interested in doing that. So I think that's the first weapon in coming, if a book is challenged, is to hand that form where a person has to make sure that they've read the entire book. They have to write down the page numbers of where the book offended them. They have to say whether this offense is resolved in the context of the story. So I think that might rule out some objections. Now, I'm not completely sure. Like I just said, I've never had a book challenge myself, but that would be my go-to is the book challenge form. We had them at Louisville Public Library. We have them in JCPS. Another thing that I would consider is doing a community survey, because if you have a small minority of people that are opposing a book, shouldn't it be a community decision on whether or not to remove that book? I mean, after all, we are a democracy, and we're, we are we going to let the squeaky wheels in society determine what our collections are, and where does that stop? Who's going to come in that's not a librarian and tell you what books should or should not be in your collection? After all, we have a selection policy. And so all of my books, I used my selection policy to make sure that it fit, the content was appropriate, and it either coincides with KCAS standards or it was something that students wanted to read. You know, it's not the easiest job to get students to want to read books. We do listen to what they say. And if a student wants to read a book, I listen to them. I think that we have to let students choose books, not people in the community that are easily offended by ideas that they don't think children can handle, because I see children handle a lot of stuff that people would not think that they could handle. An SBDM council, at least in JCPS, we all have school-based decision-making councils. So if this group who wants to remove a book, they should be invited to tell why at your SBDM council, who also has your selection policy in your book challenge forms where it can be discussed. And you can present why the book is in your collection. Now, administration backing, I have strong administration backing in my school right now. However, we know that parents outweigh the opinions of teachers in a lot of cases. So I think that could be tough. You might have to acquiesce to your principal in some regards, depending on how committed they are and how much they understand the ideas of intellectual freedom and can tactfully handle a book challenge. So those are things, again, that I don't have personal experience with, but I anticipate that we are going to be needing to think about those things this year, because books are being banned like wildfire. I have a strong teachers union that might be a resource to back me, and the ACLU has dealt with that kind of censorship before, so they might be a good resource as well. You might know that just a week ago, Mouse by Art Spiegelman was banned on National Holocaust Remembrance Day. And this is a quote I got off Twitter. I'm not really sure who said this, but I do agree with it. Kids who read Mouse are a lot less likely to compare wearing a mask to the Holocaust. So I think a lot of the racism and problems that we have understanding cultures that are other is that we don't understand even history. So there's a group of people that don't understand the horrors of the Holocaust. And it's partly because they're not reading books about it. It's partly because that gets short-circuited in curriculum, because it's a very difficult subject to teach about. And it's a lot easier to hand a book to a student and let them process it on their own if they are a reader. So I am going to go ahead and, God, gotta love Art Spiegelman. What a radical. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Martin Luther King Jr. So when we are bringing books about these other cultures, we're shedding light on it. We are making sure people know that other ethnicities and cultures are like ours. I always make sure to highlight commonalities between cultures because we're all humans, we're all Americans, we can all be resilient, we can all overcome hardships. And so when we are putting that book in front of a student, we're bringing them light. We're bringing them the light of the world and light on the cultures that they may not have any experience with, especially if you're sheltered in a smaller community. It might really help to read about the experiences of someone completely different and identify with them. There was another thing that I wanted to say about this. And I think it was that when a book is banned, it usually takes off like wildfire. So we saw Mouse being banned recently, thankfully not burned yet. And middle school students have started book clubs to read the banned books. So, and Mouse has become an Amazon bestseller, because of the controversy. So, in a way, it's going to get more people to read the books when they are banned, unfortunately. This is my YouTube channel that's just kind of getting off the ground. This project is for my professional development goal. So my goal that I identified is to get teachers to read and use more of the diverse books that have been adding to my collection. And so my book talks are geared for students and teachers. So I am a little bit goofy on them as I am in real life. This is my YouTube station that this presentation is on too. So if you ever want to look at some of those books, you can. Please email me to get a copy of the reading program slides. Then you can make your own copy to edit. I don't expect you to use all of the books that I've included. I mean, you can. You can't use my capstone books, but you can search for some more books. And it's really fun, actually, trying to decide what books to include because I always end up expanding my knowledge of multicultural literature. My email is heather.kirkman@jefferson.kyschools.us. Even though I'm Heather Kirkman Hurst, I am stuck with the Kirkman, and you might know Robert Kirkman. He's a famous graphic novel artist. There's a little homage to him with my action figures. So check out those 2-minute book talks of diverse books on the Hearts for Books YouTube channel where this presentation is posted. Feel free to email me with any questions. This is a little bit of a different format, and so I can't answer them in person, but I'm definitely willing to answer questions. Please email me at my jefferson.kyschools.us address, and I hope I've shared something valuable, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.